This is Leading Through the Storm. We're going to provide a bit of a forum for discussing disaster preparedness. Just a little bit of background. We are Superion. You might have heard of us as SunGuard Public Sector before a rebrand. But rather than doing a demonstration of product or whatnot, we thought it'd be a better use of the time to talk about some of the current issues out there for you folks. And so today we've brought together some folks that experienced Hurricane Harvey and have some stories from Irma as well. But before I get into it, I was a little curious about where folks might be from. Anyone from the Houston area or areas affected by Harvey or Irma specifically? You, right? Excellent. Very good. Excellent. So we'd love to make this interactive. With this number of folks, we can certainly accept comments and questions as we go along. I do think there might be a handheld we can use for that purpose. If folks want to stand up and yell at us, that'd be great too. All right. So, without further ado, again, we are Superion. We're a provider of RMS, CAD, mobile software solutions, but we're not here to talk about us today. I have with me here today Lieutenant Matt Dahmer from the Port Police Department in Texas. Matt asked that we do note that he's an extreme sports connoisseur, and we actually tried to get in touch with him a few weeks ago to talk about this, and he couldn't reach us. We couldn't reach him because he was in the south rim of the Grand Canyon, I think. Yeah. But no, seriously, Matt, and I've been a long time Superion customer and was ground zero there in the port. Also, to his right, I have Mr. Steve Nagley. Nagley happens to be one of our own Superion employee, but he's from McKinney, Texas. And they were one of the hardest hit flood-wise from Harvey as well. So brought Steve in to talk a few things about his personal experience. And just to his right is Mr. Kevin Lefevre. He is our president and CTO, and he's here to help ask questions and whatnot along the way. And we also experienced some interesting things in the Orlando area where our headquarters is with Irma and Irma affairs. So we want to talk briefly about that. Okay? So, Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Irma. We want to talk about disaster preparedness in general, but using these as kind of a case study. We want to walk through quickly notification about the incident as it was coming, preparedness, then what actually happened during the events, and then lessons learned after the fact. And we'll see where that road takes us. Okay, so you guys are welcome to participate with that. So I wondered if we could, Matt, you could talk about what happened as you personally started to see in the media. You know, we saw Hurricane Harvey hit the national media somewhere on August 20th or so. We started becoming aware that this thing was brewing and heading our direction. Just personally, when did you kind of take note that this thing might be real?
When it started, picked up in the media, our Emergency Operations Center partially activated, and that was probably a week out. And we have a form we follow in place, a plan. 96 hours is what we do, 72 hours is what we do, 48 hours, and just going down the checklist and making sure we have everything in place. Generators in service, we have backup generator order to be delivered before impact. Providing food for our employees that are going to stay behind and getting everything lined up, and basically all the infrastructure, letting everybody know who's going to be on the stay behind team, whether it's going to be all hands on deck, we're going to go to a modified 12-hour shift, and just letting everybody know exactly what they're going to be responsible for. And then we were, probably early the week of the hurricane, we were meeting twice a day in EOC to go over weather reports with the National Weather Service, and then once it looked like it was going to impact us, it wasn't going to be a wind event for LaPorte. We're on the east side of Houston on the bay. We knew we weren't going to get the direct impact, but when they started calling for the heavy amounts of rain and flooding, we had to prepare a different way than compared to Ike that was a direct hit, where we had a mandatory evacuation and we got everybody out of town.
Do you think folks started asking or associating this with prior events, the public anyway, in terms of Ike and other previous hurricanes? Did you see any evidence of that?
I think this hurricane was unlike any other because we had hurricanes that hit south of us in Texas coast all the time that we get zero impact from, and nobody expected the amount of rainfall. I can tell you early in the week, National Weather Service was calling for 20 to 25 inches of rain in our area. And then, you know, midway through, they're up it to 40 and 50 inches. You know, it's just unseen.
Steve, from your perspective as a citizen there, when did folks start to kind of take it seriously that some of this thing might be in our way?
Mainly midweek, I'd say. Katy is 30 miles west of downtown, and we knew the storm was going to hit 150 miles to our southwest, which would really never really impact us on a normal storm. But then they talked about how it was going to stall, there were no steering currents, and people started taking notice. And then about Wednesday of that whole week, people started really kind of go to the grocery store, and bread, milk, all of your staples would be gone. People were gassing up their vehicles. They were actually running out of gas too, and some stations were getting low on gas. So about midweek, I'd say.
So similarly with Irma, I would say the folks in the central Florida where I was, and many of us were, midweek because of the situation with Harvey, you know, chronologically afterwards, Irma, you know, people started taking notice of that coming in. It was forecast to be so strong. Your water was gone several days beforehand. Gas was gone 2 or 3 days before it was supposed to make landfall. So those basic necessities weren't there anymore. So Matt, you mentioned having that 72-hour, 48-hour, you know, plan. Do many of you have those countdown type plans in place? A couple. Can you describe briefly what some of those details are?
Well, 96 hours, like I said, you're getting everything prepared in case it does hit. 72 hours, you're notifying those that are essential personnel. You know, take care of your business and, you know, your family and anybody you need to take care of, because about 24 hours out, we'll put you on ship. And if it's a wind event like Ike was in 2008, we'll have all hands on deck, and everybody will live at the police department. With this event, it was a modified 12-hour shift where we didn't need all of our personnel. So it's just going through the motions and the checklist. You know, if it's a major wind event and our mayor orders a mandatory evacuation, that's when we start that. We're right on the bay side, so everybody on the east side of the port, we go, if they order a mandatory evacuation, we go house to house and make sure they're gone, or we issue, you know, write your social security number on your arm or something. Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts about the time coming in to really get to the hardcore preparation you think is relevant for folks?
Sure. Okay. I mean, you know, I can tell you that this was a lot different from Ike, and many of you that are on the Gulf Coast, you've experienced a direct hit. You know exactly, you know, when it's coming, where it's coming, how it's going to get there, and you're able to prepare. This one, you didn't know if it was going to stall. You didn't know if it was really going to do what they say you do. And I can tell you the main thing you need to think about, though, is feeding your troops. Because when it floods like this and all the power's gone and your mayor issues a curfew, there's no place open to eat. You can't buy food. And then you have to be able to get resupplied. You know, we started off with a 72-hour supply of food that Cisco delivered 2 days before the storm. And you know, it went well, but Cisco couldn't get there to resupply us. But the main thing is taking care of your people and making sure your night shift people are taken care of as well. Because during Ike, that was a lesson learned. We kind of forgot about those guys working 12 hours at night, eating to eat lunch.
Yeah. So, and when we were talking previously, it was in preparing for this, it was pretty obvious that this became like battle preparation. You know, you always have to get that mindset up. You're sending the troops to battle, and they got to get back out as quickly as possible. So let's shift into the actual event then. So I think it made landfall on the 25th of August. Steve, from a citizen's perspective, what started happening around you besides just a bit raining? What happened in terms of the community?
In actuality, when the storm hit, we didn't get rain for about 2.5 days.
Oh, wow.
we said, oh, this is going to be a non-event. You know, we knew it was stalling, but the bands weren't coming up really towards Houston, that area. Rockport got hit hard, Port Aransas got hit hard, but we were thinking, oh, they were wrong about this. And about day 2.5 into the storm is when we started seeing that upper right quadrant really kind of blow up with rain. And people, we had heard rumors about the potential 30 to 50 inches, which is an ungodly amount of rain in that amount of time. And people were, I mean, I gassed up my boat. I normally don't gas my boat up. We gassed up all our vehicles. And so people, like I said, the shells were flying out of groceries and gas was, in short supply, but nothing was happening yet. So when it started raining, it really didn't quit for about 2.5 days. We ended up with 40 inches in Katy. We have a major bayou that runs through town, and about 20% of the town ended up flooding. But it was something that the first part of it we thought was going to be an event.
So we've got a couple photos that I think you shared. Nice camera work, by the way. Yeah.
Well, that was in a plastic bag, so I wouldn't put my phone.
So this is your boat, I guess?
This is actually a buddy's boat. I was in another boat. This is an interesting story about how social media really played a part in this. And I'm not a big Facebook guy. I'm on it, but I'm not I don't post much. But my wife does.
You're just a lurker.
Yeah, lurker.
Yeah.
So my wife does, and she received a message from one of her friends about a disabled couple that down further, maybe half a mile away, that needed help and couldn't get out. And the whole thing originated from Boston. Apparently, their daughter lived in Boston, and they kept the couple that lived in Katy kept calling 911 to no avail because they were doing 911 was swamped, right? They couldn't get help to everybody. So a lot of citizens ended up getting people out, and that's what happened here. But the whole thing originated in Boston. Some lady from Boston posted about their family needing to get out in Katy, Texas. They didn't know where to post this on Katy, and so they ended up finding something about Katy, some forum, and from that forum it went to another forum, and then it ended up within like 15 minutes of them posting this. My wife got a message like, "Hey, what's Steve doing? There's a couple on Bluebonnet Street, which is down the road, that need to get out." I said, "Okay, we'll go get them." And so it hadn't gotten out, and by the time I got there was another boat already headed there too, so we got there about the same time, and we got them out. But it's just kind of a fascinating story how someone from Boston helped rescue someone in Texas through Facebook. So.
And I will add, and Steve's being a little humble, but it did make national news, and he was recognized nationally as the person who saved him was this guy named Steve, and he was recognized nationally as the guy named Steve. But it was for us, as a company who provides and really makes our living supporting public safety officials, to have one of our own caught in it, and to be able to have him kind of step outside his own family and get involved in helping rescue others was it was great. And I think we felt like it represented us extremely well, represented who we are and what we stand for, and it was fun to see him get that national recognition as well.
Just a redneck with a boat.
Hashtag not named Steve. Okay, what's this?
Well, this is in our hometown of Katy. Katy's about 16,000 population, surrounded by Houston, right? So there's 500,000 within 10 miles of us. But our little hometown, this was a railroad crossing, and the flood basically wiped out part of that railroad, the railroad ties and everything underneath. And we felt like this actually was exacerbating the flood and keeping the floodwaters in, because we had this big railroad, this levee basically on a railroad track that was holding all the water in. And when this thing broke, the water kind of receded and it helped us. So it was actually a good thing this thing broke. But that's just one of the things. Here is where the floodwaters took away the banners from the gas stalls here in one location. And this is my old street where I had a house previously and it ended up flooding. We had moved a few years ago and to higher ground, luckily, and but this was our old street that real close. And this is the aftermath. I never really thought about what a flood does to, to a house. I'd never been through one, but when you see that, how much stuff they have to take out and tear out, this is the aftermath.
So we'll come back in just a second to a couple more years, but I want to ask you, Lieutenant, your experience during the storm. So obviously that was kind of a week of your life.
Right.
And I know we can't necessarily hear them all, but what do you think is important to tell these folks about the preparedness and how that factored into what actually happened?
Like Steve said, it hit Rockport. We expected rain to start Friday afternoon. We were set to go all hands on deck, 12-hour shifts, 7 p.m. on Friday. Well, it didn't hit, so we scaled back to a modified 12-hour shift with, portions of our staff and sent them home and stayed on 12 Saturday morning. Still nothing happening, and the weather service is calling for rain, and we allowed day shift to go home at 7 p.m. on Saturday evening because it just looked like it was going to be a non-event. It was raining on the west side of Houston, southwest of Houston, but it was wide open over the east side. At about 2 in the morning, Saturday morning, is when the rain started. And if you looked at the weather radar, it was just a tail down into the Gulf, 100 miles long. And that just trained over Houston and Harris County for the next, 24 hours. And we were getting upwards of 5 inches of rain an hour sometimes, and it just overwhelmed. We've done a lot of work for drainage in Houston and Harris County, and the idea is to use the streets as to hold the water so it doesn't go into the houses. Well, the downside of that is you can't get around. Okay, so we had sent day shift home. They couldn't get back to work at 7 a.m. the next day, so we ended up holding our night shift over for most of the next day until we could get fresh troops in, and then trying to get everybody back on a 12-hour schedule was really a challenge. So we had a really good plan A going into the storm. You have to have a plan B and C just in case something else happens, and be prepared for it. We were pretty fortunate. We're a town of about 35,000 population. We only had about 500 homes that flooded. But we used some new tactics this year to help these people out. During the height of the storm, we put together strike teams that consisted of 2 police officers, 2 paramedics, and 2 firefighters, and used school buses as high water vehicles. And we could send them in and have everything you needed at a one-stop stop on a call. If it's a security issue, the police are there. If it's a medical issue, EMS is there. If it's a manpower issue, the fire department's there. If we need to evacuate, we have the school bus, and we had one of those manned at all 4 of our fire stations, and if there were rescue calls, we sent those guys out to handle that and left our regular patrol guys, either sheltering, waiting on the storm to subside, or where we could get easily with regular vehicles. And that worked out well. And sometimes those guys, we couldn't get in with school bus, and they were wading waist deep into help people out. So.
And I'm sure we most of us saw those videos of guys wading in or being tethered up to each other and whatnot. But I thought the use and the partnering with the school system to use the buses was really cool. And things that normally would be on the table in terms of sharing resources and things like this. You mentioned something else. You mentioned earlier about preparing with food. What you do during the event there?
So during the, I mentioned before, we had about 72 hours worth of food. And then, if you're familiar with the Houston, Harris County area and Galveston area, it's been said it's about the size of the state of New Hampshire. It's a pretty big, widespread area. And consider that entire area was affected by floodwaters. So we have a contract with Cisco to deliver food in 24 hours notice. At about 36, 48 hours into the storm, we called and said, we can't get to you.
Cisco doesn't have a helicopter.
That's it. They can't get there. So with our relationship with the school district, we were able to go around to the cafeterias at school and take food from the cafeterias that wasn't going to be used anyway because kids were all out. We had school closed for a year, and we're able to keep continuing to care for our force.
Very cool.
And talking about, yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Go right ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the dollars.
You're exactly right.
And understand that that's their responsibility. But that's what happened to us. We called our troops in. The rain wasn't quite coming. We thought we missed the bullets. The discussion started. Should we send folks home? And we said, no, let's wait. If it's the cheapest insurance that we can get, to keep it here. Well, it turns out, whole city flooded. Never flooded before to this extent.
Right.
1,000 homes flooded. We had 300 rescue calls waiting at a time. It was chaotic.
You-
But when things don't match the weather service report, suddenly the call starts getting, well, let's start sending folks home and start downscaling. You gotta watch for that and not let it happen.
And you're exactly right. And when I say we allowed people to go home, we didn't downscale our force. We allowed them to go home during their off time instead of making them house at one of the local hotels or at the station. And, you know, if you live 20 minutes away, you just couldn't get back. And what that did, it forced us to work some of our guys 20 hours until we could get some more people in. You know, once the heaviest flooding rain subsided in LaPorte, we were able to, you know, it kind of, the flooding subsided just a little bit so we could get people into work and get back on schedule. But you're exactly right.
That's no problem. Nobody can afford to live in the city.
Mm-hmm.
When they go home,
Right.
we are not going to see it again.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's what we've been, that's the requirement,
Yeah.
storm and recovery.
Right.
And because we just, if we don't get folks in, have them on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
we just make anything like this.
Well,
You just don't.
and you're exactly right. I'll give you a prime example. So the storm hit Sunday morning, the heaviest rain started, but we're still flooding Monday night. Okay, we had an officer-involved shooting at 11 p.m. on Monday night. All right, I'm working EOC. I'm on the phone with the DA shoot team. He's in the villages on the west side of Houston. I can't get to you. Then we employed a Texas Ranger to do our homicide investigation because, you know, officer involved, so we want outside agency, no improprieties. He's in Katy. He can't get to us either. These guys are on the phone at 1 in the morning trying to line up a helicopter to get to us to investigate this shooting. They showed up at 4 p.m. the next day. So that's the scale of this flooding. I mean, the Harris County Jail quit accepting prisoners for about 36 hours, I think, because you just couldn't get there.
I think that's the basic principle behind all of this is disaster is when you truly, it goes beyond your preparation, right? And what can you do to ratchet up all those things so that, you know, maybe you don't go quite beyond all. So I've heard several interesting things so far in terms of just notes for us and takeaways. Matt, you mentioned plan A, plan B, plan C. You know, they had a great plan A, but when that plan A didn't pan quite out and you had to let some of those folks go to home to sleep, plan B wasn't as strong as it needed to be, or plan C. Right?
And basically you just had to, we had to improvise and do the best we could with what we had, and we were lucky that we didn't, you know, nothing really bad happened in LaPorte, but it very well could have, but we always had sufficient manpower. They just were working on short sleep, you know.
Another thing you mentioned was, of course, in partnering with the school system, and so partnering with other local agencies that maybe you don't normally have access to under normal situations, but the buses as high water vehicles.
Yeah.
I mean, that's genius. You know, get a lot of people on there, but it might as well be an armored vehicle, right?
So we've got access to 20 buses with the school district, I couldn't keep a fleet of 20 high water vehicles sitting on the back lot waiting for this historic flood to happen. You know, we have a lot of agencies that have them. What generally happens when you have a specialized vehicle like that? You know, nobody goes out and starts it when they're supposed to, and then when it comes down to it, it doesn't work like it's supposed to. So, yeah, that's a pretty good relationship.
And then of course the downscaling, downsizing, or letting folks go home. You know, obviously that's something to be worried about. I thought your example, that's the best insurance policy we could buy. That's a great point for everybody to take home, I think. I'd like to shift real quick, and I want to show a quick video. We had another person in the Harvey area, Lieutenant Gerald Kellerman from the League City Police Department. He allowed us to come and video him and talk a little bit about their experience as well. They were very hard hit. So if we could, let's take a look at that. Fast forward through Steve's picture. Oh, before I do, Steve had one more. Well, I'm sorry, you had two more pictures to talk about real quick, and we'll show Daryl's video. So this is a neighborhood.
That's my neighbor's house who ended up staying with us. We were dry, and they obviously weren't. So. And
is that the high water line?
That's the high water line. You know.
Wow.
It's terrible. And that's about all you can do when it, you know, just watch it rain and have a drink, right?
When you're on high ground.
You can see the water back there just pouring down.
5 inches an hour.
Yeah, it was.
Yes. Good whiskey, good whiskeys. And let's take a look at this video.
We've been a Superior Island customer for a little over 10 years, starting back in 2005. We are the host agency for about 20-something law enforcement agencies, fire and EMS. Harvey presented what we felt was going to be a heavy rain event. We had activated our EOC well before the event occurred. No one could have imagined that we would have experienced really several instances that increased the problems with this storm, and that was we were impacted during a high tide. The storm stalled out just northwest of us and then was pushed back out to the Gulf. And so as these rivers and these creeks and these levees and these bayous crested, there was nowhere for the water to go because it was during a high tide. And so many of our community members were without insurance because they were in 100 and 500-year floodplains. And of course this event was an 800-year flood. And so many of the areas in our community were flooded, had never seen water to this extent, had never seen flooding. And so that represented a special set of challenges for us. We lost probably about 20% of our vehicles out in the community during responses, or they've been flooded at our staff's homes. About 20% of our staff members lost their own homes, but we're here responding to emergencies and saving community members. After the first day or two of dealing with this situation is that we only had a limited supply of high water vehicles. We had people in the community offering their boats and jet skis. And so we started parsing our first line of staff members out to civilian boats, ATVs, and high water vehicles. We had a great deal of water rescues because folks didn't leave their homes and they weren't anticipating this type of water event. That was a challenge to us because no police department, no public safety, no fire department in this area has a fleet of high water vehicles or a fleet of flat bottom boats to provide that type of long-term rescues. And so we relied on the kindness of our community members to help and assist with these responses. The National Guard was wonderful and helped us respond to these rescue attempts. And it was just a difficult situation, but this community came together collectively. By the end of the fourth day of this event, we had a tremendous amount of volunteers. It became an issue where we were having to manage volunteers. We had so many people wanting to help out. We did have folks trying to save people as quickly as we could in the storm, but we realized that logistically our assets were limited. We were relying on a whiteboard to determine where our assets were, and then we were radioing calls for service to field units serving in multiple high water vehicles. Well, as these things start coming in and wading through and prioritizing 700 calls, we had our dispatch center assigning priorities to each one of these calls, so we knew if somebody needed an immediate rescue or if they were just having 2 or 3 inches of high water in their home. It became quickly apparent that that was kind of overwhelming. So we realized, well, we've had the Freedom app for a while. We've been using it in the field with our supervisors and our detectives, and we didn't have a way to effectively communicate outside of our radio system. but everybody still had working cell phones. And so many of our sworn personnel who did not have waterproof phones were actually taking their cell phones and wrapping them in either saran wrap or either in plastic bags. And they were using Google at the time to try to figure out where they were, because the topography of the land had changed. When you get in a boat or a jet ski and you've seen 6 to 8 foot of water over a roadway that never existed before, it was difficult for our first responders to figure out exactly where they were in the community. And so we realized after that first day of impact that we needed to find a better way of doing things, and Superion was there to support that effort with their mobile platform. We were able to quickly get our first line responders into our EOC and load each one of their phones with the Freedom One Solution app. It was dynamic enough to allow us to manage a mobile workforce during a catastrophic event, and we felt like it was an absolutely critical piece of software for us, because without it, we would have been relying on minimal radio traffic. Our field units would have had to comb through 1,000 calls or more rescue attempts via radio traffic, which quickly became very confusing trying to manage that many mobile field units over the radio. Several of the agencies flooded. They lost their police departments. Because we're on a consortium and we have over 20 agencies participating, and we have many different PSAPs across the county, and because of our connectivity, because of the dynamic nature that Superion provides, those public safety agencies were able to move their dispatch centers to other areas of participating law enforcement agencies who are part of the consortium and continue dispatching as if they were in their own building. There were many requests that came out of our own community to help surrounding areas that were impacted by the storm. Our folks out in the field were able to monitor those calls across the entire region and provide assistance as needed to other area community members. Superion played a critical role in all of these agencies in the Gulf Coast region being able to deliver critical services out in the field, and it allowed for a more efficient and effective first response from our people out in the field, and I have no doubt that it helped us save lives.
So huge thanks to Lieutenant there for allowing us to do that. And that actually came, the video came out of the contact we had with him during Harvey, and 2 days into the storm, so I think it was actually Monday, we got a text from him, it was an email to one of our staff members saying, thank you for being with us, but he had a couple very interesting stats. He wanted to thank us. He was effusive there, and we actually cut out a lot of things because we just wanted this to be about the event. But he said that CAD, at one point in time during the event, had 1,000 open calls for service, active open calls, and that they performed 2,000 water rescues recorded on either Freedom or a mobile app in those first 2 days. Just incredible volume, and goes way beyond anything we hoped would ever be an actuality, an actual situation. Matt, do you happen to know anything about stats or whatnot?
I don't have a lot of stats to share with you, but I can tell you we all share a common CAD. LaPorte is part of the League City Consortium. Each agency is connected to the servers at League City Police Department by fiber, and we're individual agencies, but we're all on the same CAD server, and we never lost connectivity through this storm. And a lot of that has to do with some lessons we learned from Ike. Superion's got a great product, but during Ike, we lost some connectivity because our fiber went down. We didn't have power at our fiber nodes. So after Ike, we negotiated with our fiber provider, and the LaPorte Police Department hosts a node, and the League City Police Department hosts a node. So all the fiber connections come through our two PDs on the southeast side of Harris County, so they're never going to lose power. And it gives us that security to know that we're going to have it, and their other customers are going to be okay too.
That's a great point. So connectivity, and not just inside the agency, but to external agencies, especially if you have a shared CAD. Does anybody else employ that strategy of having a node directly terminating in their EOC or PD? Okay, it's also in the alley, yeah. So that's another lesson learned, I think, of what we can take away from this. Okay. Now, so obviously we could tell more stories and things about what went on, but looking back, and Steve, interested to get to your take on this as well, but looking back now and seeing what happened and saw what worked and what didn't, what would we do different next time around? What should we consider?
Talking to me?
Sure.
All right. Like the gentleman chief out there said, it's a cheap insurance policy. You need to stick with your plan, and yeah, there's going to be some pressure when it doesn't turn out like it's going to be. But you know, it just one situation to go wrong, and it's well worth it. So that's the main thing. Stick with your plan, and have a backup plan, and just be ready to go.
Plan A, B, and C.
Yeah.
One thing I'll say is buy flood insurance,
Yeah.
even if you don't think you need it.
Literally, right?
Yeah.
Hey, so just a follow-up question on that, Matt. So for you know, having the plan A, B, and C, can you elaborate on what you might have done, what you would have considered to be more of a, besides the people maybe, right? And on what a plan B or C, and how, you know, what you learned going through it, what you wish you guys would have been doing well in advance.
We have a contract with a caterer for an event, and with 24 hours notice, they can come in. They have a 72-hour minimum, and we talked about using them in the early stages. And if we, you know, had them there before the event, through the event, it would have made it a lot easier on our EOC staff. We had basically 3 managers in the city that were doing all the cooking and cleaning and making sure our troops were fed, instead of doing what their real job was on EOC. You know, and of course they had some downtime, but and we contacted the caterer after it started, and they said we can't get there now. So you can have all the contracts in the world, but you know, something like this, folks aren't going to be able to get there if you don't get them early enough.
Yeah, so you were talking earlier about the food prep and whatnot. Just imagining that, you know, those are people forced into, I think you mentioned when we were talking earlier, 14-hour days,
Yeah.
just doing nothing but cooking, just keeping everyone fed, which you don't think about in your normal course of business. You got to think about, I'm glad you didn't mention there were any latrines that had to be dug or anything such as that.
Wasn't that bad?
So what are questions you might have of Lieutenant here? Yes, sir.
You said your radio networks went down.
No.
To what extent did the radio networks go down? And how resilient were the mobile phone networks?
It was just, the radio network never went down. It was just so many calls for service that there wasn't enough, you know, we couldn't put that much radio traffic out. And our mobile phones stayed up text and calling, so the mobile app that we installed worked perfect, because basically Freedom is a mobile app, mobile CAD for your cell phone. So I can log into my CAD right now and see everything actively that's going on. I can do everything I can on my telephone that I can do in the car, except write a citation or a report.
Right, and just a follow-up question. So the radio traffic, that was officers and first responders calling incidences in, and that was literally between police outside the officers
Right,
and
because,
dispatch.
you know, when you got that many guys on the street and that many calls and that many dispatchers, and, you know, you got every channel you have is busy.
And, sorry, I don't know much about the app, so when they log into the app, so they can do full field service on the app, you see where
Everything.
they are when they're logged in on
It's
the app?
just like mobile CAD on your MCT in your car.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
If you'd like to see more about the Freedom app, come to booth 253.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I assume during the emergency you gave them the extra, the extra licenses?
Oh,
for
absolutely.
The
Yeah.
time period.
Yeah, as an organization, we started reaching out ahead of time. Do you need anything? What might you need to know? And you know, we just took off that restriction. And like you said, I think Daryl said, you know, hundreds were deployed in that 12-hour shift.
What do you do about the, there's no technical rule, but it's a little bit of slippery slope as far as bring your own device, as far as, you know, I assume you didn't do any,
We don't do any, we don't use TCIC, NCIC anyway, because we still haven't figured out the CJIS stuff with the, you know, you can do MDM, but you can't get malware protection and all that on a mobile device. But, you know, all that's out the window in a situation like that. And I'm sure Daryl probably wiped all the devices, took it back off. You know, but Superion's been great. Anytime we've had an emergency, not just this one, they call and said, hey, don't worry about, install whatever you need to install, you know, because we pay C licenses, but I can install anything I want, you know, and and hope I don't get audited. You know what I mean? But they're so gracious, they call and say, hey, whatever you need, do what you need, we'll take it back off later.
And Freedom does have multi-factor authentication, especially when used for NCIC, that type of access. But that's kind of up to the agency which flavor they want to choose.
And
Sorry, another question. How long did it take you to get all that data up and running on your platform?
Oh, it's natural. It's live with CAD. As soon as they install the app, it's ready to go.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I meant
Oh,
it's getting up and
initial
running.
install.
basically, yeah, they'll have to, you send the install to the phone,
Right.
and then, you know, you download the app, you put the server in, the term ID, and it's good to go.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it takes a couple minutes, but you do have to touch every device.
Understood. Thank you.
We have had agencies internally for testing. We push it out via device management as well. So. Other questions? Yes, sir.
From an emergency management perspective, are there any lessons that you might pass on? Are there any gaps, substantial gaps in training that kind of, oh crap, they're right in the middle of the game that you go back now, you do something differently?
You know, I can't say that there was in LaPorte. We have our council backs us very well. We actually participated in the National Hurricane Drill in June, and we had our EOC open for 48 hours, including staffing the shelter at the Pasadena Convention Center. So, you know, we had just done a big drill, so I can't say that we would do anything different in our EOC, to be honest.
Keep on doing the drills.
Yeah, exactly. That's the cheapest thing you can do. You know, when it comes to budget, we start talking about cutting training first, and you can't. And you have to have the right people in EOC, not just because they're assigned that position, because it's the right person for that position.
There's a question back there.
Yes, sir.
Through your experience, I guess, can you offer any persuasion techniques if you're going door to door trying to get people to leave their home and they're adamant that they're not leaving? Any persuasion techniques?
I mean,
Guy with a gold one?
yeah, I mean, to be honest, when I came and we mandatory evacuated, we didn't make anybody leave. We didn't, you know, I said, we're not going to force you, but I want your name, who's staying with you, and we had a list, and you know, and literally we told some of them, you might want to write your social security number on yourself somewhere, or you might want to, you know, be prepared, because in the heat of the storm, we're not coming. Yeah, you know, we were able, this wasn't a wind event, so we were able to get out and perform rescues. During Ike, when the winds got above 35 miles an hour, we didn't make any calls, so there was a you know, 18, 20-hour stretch where we didn't make rescue calls. And that's the bottom line. Just have to tell them we're not coming. You know, you're on your own.
Persuasion.
Yeah.
I like this emphasis on the
Yeah.
word. Persuasion.
Sorry, final technical question about installation. So what was your DR plan? You said that things went down and the service didn't have access and didn't follow it exactly. So you had to, can you just repeat what you said, please, about it?
Disaster recovery for servers. I'm not sure if you're aware
About
of
the
actual failover for servers if the server were to go down.
You said something about going to a different operating
Oh,
center.
because we're a consortium. Okay, so I'll give you an example. The city of Dickinson is a member of our consortium. They completely flooded. I mean, the 100% of the city was flooded. They can take their dispatch staff, drive to League City Police Department,
Right.
LaPorte Police Department, transfer radios and telephones, log into CAD as they're in their PD,
Right.
and continue dispatch operations from another
Connectivity was already
location.
established since it's centralized.
Yeah,
Same
Right,
data.
Okay, so your DR plan worked.
yes.
Good question.
Okay.
Others? Yes, sir.
If you could, I guess, just volunteers and civilian folks that were just kind of folks or whatnot, how did you leverage / manage / what was the information campaign to control those assets? Or what became assets, I guess?
That's a great question, and I don't really have an answer for that, because we didn't experience as much of that as LaPorte as Darrell did in League City. Now, we did experience a lot of volunteers and giving in days past when the water, you know, went down. I mean, so much so that you know, I think the way they leveraged it is they put an officer, a sworn officer, with a civilian. And that's how they managed that boat. That officer was with this boat, this officer's with this boat, and so on.
Hey, but you shared another story, though, about the generosity following. Maybe just touch on that. Just, it gives us hope, you know, for humanity, right?
We
Generally?
had about 500 homes flooded in LaPorte. We were, and we're very fortunate that that's the only number we had. But we had an individual come several days after the storm and write a check for $20,000 to our Citizens Police Academy Alumni Association, which is a 501c3, and said, I want this to go to flood victims in LaPorte. And we've since raised about another $40,000 through private donors and the plants in the past. And starting as soon as we got that check, we started taking applications, and the chiefs have been handing out $500 gift cards to victims of the flood. And we're still continuing that. Money's still coming in. And that way we get cash to people that needed a place to stay, needed something to eat, that lost everything. And without the generosity of our partners, there's no way we'd have been able to help our citizens like that.
So there's those formal ways, but there's also the ad hoc one-on-one. So there was a story of an officer that couldn't quite get back in and sitting in the parking lot.
Yeah, our chief went home on Saturday night, and he lives in Friendswood, which is about 20 miles away. Took a Tahoe and thought you know, it's a high water vehicle, I'll be able to get back. And he gets about halfway back to LaPorte, and it's obvious he can't get there. And he's over in a parking lot in a marked Tahoe, and this guy pulls up in a monster truck looking for something to do. And he said, I just want to help. He says, I need you. And he took him to the LaPorte Police Department. He got out when I was coming to work. I said, when did he get that truck?
Had a Bigfoot on the side.
Yeah.
Great digger. Nice. Good stuff. Yes, sir.
So how was the working relationship, whether it be inside of the EOC or out in the field, with fire personnel?
We have a pretty good relationship in LaPorte with all our guys. And we trained together a lot. We had just done in February of last year, a mass casualty shooting drill with everybody involved. So it's a pretty good relationship. And we train in EOC, and you know, police department is usually over operations with a fire guy and a EMS guy in there. But we work major scenes all the time, and everybody gets along pretty good. And I can say it's not that way everywhere, but you know, and I can tell you what, the fire department's really good at incident command. They practice it every time. They're better than us. You know, I don't want to give you a form if I need manpower. You know, I just give me what I need. But they're really good, and if you have the right people in place, it works out really well.
So, just a follow-up question on that: was there an issue with process as opposed to really just operation, maybe execute and rescue, people getting bogged down with too much of the ICS process, check that clock before sending assets out to do rescues?
No, not at all. I mean, it's here, we're going to send them, we'll get you the paperwork when we get it to you. You know, and in our EOC, so we've got our dispatch center in the next room over from our EOC, but I also have a dispatch manager in EOC that's handling all those calls when they come in from our EOC call center, and then everybody's situated right there, and there's no lag time.
So I guess what I heard you say is that it was key that it was already a relationship, you're already doing it.
And that's the whole thing, is building those relationships, drilling together so everybody understands what each other is capable of, and you know, making sure your policies and procedures kind of match the same way, so we all know how to work the same way anyway.
And Lieutenant gave me a story earlier about the working together, that, you know, there are lots of different personalities, and a lot of times those kind of things can clash, but for whatever reason, this event brought out the best in most of your folks.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funniest part. You could have, you know, we all know you have officers and firefighters that get burnt out, and, you know, they hate everybody, hate the world. Those guys came together and performed rescues and worked like they were brothers, like they were supposed to in this event. And it's like, why can't we get to do this all the time, right?
Any final questions? We got time for one or two more. Okay, please come and see us at our booth, and how about a round of applause for Lieutenant?